Diffusion, the international science radio show.
We have a bouncer on the doors of perception.
The good, the bad, the ugly.
It gets pretty exciting.
The myths, the truths.
Toxicology.
Astroseismology.
Magnetism. The dark side.
Genetically engineered potatoes.
Planetoid.
Planetoid.
I love that word.
Hello and welcome to Diffusion. Sit back and relax while we inject weird and wonderful science directly into your dreams. I'm Ian Woolf. On this edition, Sonda Fransen talks about zero carbon energy for New South Wales. But first up, here's news of surveillance in schools. Catholic schoolgirls caught on camera. The startup company LoopLearn has won a contract to run a trial of surveillance cameras feeding into face recognition software for Australian schools. The company claims the cameras all over the school are there purely to make the roll call in the morning faster and easier for teachers than just reading out a list of names. It's just a coincidence that the first test subjects will be 16 and 17-year-old girls attending Year 11 at the Sacred Heart College. Staff will be able to watch and locate students all over the school, in real time on a web dashboard and using a mobile app. There's no teacher demand to shorten roll call time, and the students are unhappy at the invasion of their privacy. In a typical Year 11 classroom of 20 students, roll call would be about 3 seconds per student, which would take about a minute. LoopLearn's website says LoopLearn uses advanced machine vision technologies to monitor your learning spaces, replacing the existing roll marking process. We provide you with small, unobtrusive, purpose-designed devices. Made for schools, these devices sit in your learning spaces and automatically mark the roll at times you decide. They tactfully leave out any use of the word camera. The LoopLearn privacy policy says, in carrying out our business, it may be necessary to share information about you with and between our related bodies, corporate and organisations that provide services to us. In Britain, a school makes students check in with a face recognition system and a 4-digit code when they arrive at school and when they leave, so that they can be punished when they're late. In China, the government claim they're using mass surveillance to watch kids in schools every 30 seconds to make certain the students are paying attention. The system estimates their emotions from their facial expressions and uses an algorithm to decide which emotions are connected to paying attention. If you don't pay attention, you're punished. In the US, the government are using mass surveillance to constantly watch kids in high schools. They say to make sure there are no intruders to prevent school shootings. None of the school shootings in the US were from intruders. Astonishingly, the school in Lockport, New York will also use the camera system to keep a record of who speaks to whom, where they speak, and for how long, for the purpose of enforcing discipline. More schools in Victoria are expected to join Sacred Heart College in installing online camera systems in the near future, with a rollout to schools around Australia at a later stage. A system of cameras connected to the internet to spy and identify kids in school. Let's hope the pictures never get online, the database never gets hacked, and the whole system is never abused. You're listening to Ian Woolf on Diffusion Science Radio. Send emails to science@diffusionradio.com. We're brought to you across Australia on the Community Radio Network and podcast over the internet on www.diffusionradio.com. When will the stars align for zero carbon energy in New South Wales? Sander Fransen is from the Netherlands, and he's just graduated from a master's degree in energy and environmental sciences with the topic, when will the stars align for zero carbon in New South Wales? We met at the Central Park Mall food court, and I began by asking him, as you're from the Netherlands, why study the New South Wales energy system?
So it's part of my studies. I'm really fascinated by power systems. They're so crucial in our daily lives, but people tend to forget the importance of it. They're as important, more or less, as food systems, etc., water systems as well. They all are taken for granted. Water comes from your tap, energy comes from your power plug, but there's a whole system behind it that's rather complex in terms of technical and social organization often. So I looked at 4 items. The 4 items are the economics, the politics, of course the technical aspects, and what we did, and that's special from design thinking, what I acquainted in the Design Innovation Research Center, is we looked at the phase out of plastic bags, single-use plastic bags throughout Australia, and if we can see what we can learn from that frame if we apply that frame to the New South Wales energy system.
And so what have you learned from looking at single-use plastic bags when you apply it to the New South Wales energy system?
What happened more or less with single-use plastic bags, they were first banned in Bangladesh because they were clogging sewer systems. So people started a movement to get rid of them. That movement spread around India, and in India there was another reason, because the holy cows in India were eating them and they were starving to death because of eating plastic bags. This movement spread further across Africa, where the plastic bags were banned because they were used as toilets, so-called flying toilets. People were throwing the plastic bags with their feces away, up until bans in the Western world, where bags most of the times are banned due to environmental reasons, often related to marine ecology, so marine animal suffocating. And that's what you see in Australia as well. So the plastic ban movement started in Tasmania, in a small town called Coles Bay, where, well, it was polluting their natural environment. Tourists didn't like it, so the town took pride of banning the plastic bag. It was really also a thing of pride. This movement came to mainland Australia, where small towns banned the plastic bags as well because of their pride, resulting in statewide bans. And in the end, as we all know now, the biggest retailers, Coles and Woolworths, have banned them, resulting still to like riots or discussion about it. Like, people are not used to it. The interesting part there is more or less all states in Australia banned it, legalized bans, except for New South Wales.
So we're a bit slower here.
Yeah. So that's what you see as well in the energy system. More or less all states have legalized renewable energy targets or carbon targets, except New South Wales. So what we can learn from that is that there could be really a bottom-up movement as well in the energy system. And then we look at power, so electricity, but also electric cars. A bottom-up movement to ban, let's say, fossil fuels. So if we look at the ban of plastic bags, as if it was the ban of fossil fuels, we could see churches starting movements to ban the fossil fuels for religious reasons. And not only churches, but every religious movement could actually do that. So that's a lesson we can learn. And it's already happening. What happened with plastic bags as well is they became a fashion item, or a carry-on bag became a fashion item. So a month ago I walked through George Street here in Sydney, and what you see there is that Louis Vuitton has solar panels on display. As well, in Broadway there was a Tesla. Broadway Shopping Center had a Tesla on display. And I think it's already happening. People put more and more solar panels on their roofs. Solar boom, so-called solar boom, and New South Wales has the highest penetration of rooftop solar, decentralized, already in the world. So this movement could continue. And I think, the system is not really ready for it. The discussion is really on the level of still a centralized system, keeping the coal-fired producers in place, the big companies that more or less have monopolies. And there are all kinds of other problems with the current system, like indeed there is only a few big companies owning the whole wholesale market of electricity. A lot of CO2 emissions, and the system is just not working for the people. So what people can do, and what you see them doing, is taking their own action. And well, this can disrupt the system, so it could be dangerous as well.
So, what, you're saying people can take their own action by installing solar panels, or what do you mean?
Yeah, so they can take action on multiple fronts, installing their own systems, home storage, which is not really economically viable at the moment. And what you see happening is they disrupt the current system, leading to all kinds of problems. So the solar boom is all over the news all the time, but when you look at actual production, in the total energy mix, the solar production by rooftops is pretty small. But because all these rooftops start producing at the same moment, all together, they stress out the system. The system is not built for dealing with it. I like to make the comparison with the internet, the open access movement on internet. So we're talking about a fixed system, the energy grid, more or less a natural monopoly. And when you want, as a solar rooftop producer, as a homeowner, you want to produce something, you want to send electricity to your neighbor, to the grid, technically it's very well possible. But in terms of management of the system, at the moment it's really hard. And you can make the comparison with, for example, taking a taxi in Sydney. There is a flat tariff for sending energy. So 1 kilowatt from here to the end of the state, 200 kilometers, will cost you the same as sending 1 kilowatt hour of energy to your neighbor, which means a flat rate for taxis throughout Sydney. And when you talk about this energy system like this, it completely doesn't make sense, especially with updated technologies. The system is built for one-way direction, big companies sending electricity to your house, and they do that in a great way. It drives your economy, it works still more or less, but with the new technologies, the system is outdated and the way of thinking, especially about the system, is very outdated.
So how can we keep our system working, but also move towards a zero carbon future?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and that's what I like to do, make the comparison with internet. You want the consumers to become prosumers, active consumers in the system, and have their voice heard and have their wants and needs heard as well. So you want the system to work for the people instead of just imposing it more or less on the people. That's a kind of tricky question because you want to have them empowered, you want to have them use their new technologies, and it's possible, technically it's possible, so you want to change the management structure and a way of thinking about the system. So there are examples out there, and I use the NADI model. It's the model of needs and aspirations. So when we look at the bottom level, you see that the current system has more or less the norms and values of control and centralized control. Where you want to go to is more empowerment of the consumer. That's a really key term for what we see happening. In the current model, there's a lot of things wrong. A possible solution is market fixes by the government. You see this market fixes being proposed by ACCC in a big report, which is actually, I think, touches all the points needed. So what the government could do is indeed implement those market fixes. This, in some terms, I think, these quick fixes are needed, especially to drive consumer prices down. But when I look at the empowerment, look at the themes and values emerging there and the solutions, you might not just do the quick fixes, but redesign and rethink the energy system. So the goal would not be big companies sending energy, but more sending and receiving energy by consumers, making consumers so-called prosumers, active consumers. And how can you do that? Well, there are examples out there. An example is the Universal Energy Framework, developed in Europe, the Netherlands, by some energy companies together with research institutions. And another example is the Australian Power Ledger, for example. They use the same way of thinking and a blockchain technology. And simply said, what they do is they empower the consumer by putting an actor there which could be, let's say, a government, but it should be, let's say, non-political, a governmental organization that, for example, lets consumers aggregate their energy, sell the consumers' energy on the wholesale market, but also let people bid in negative energy in the market. So, for example, when everyone has high demand and you don't mind switching off your fridge for a second, or another example could be a big company switching off their production for an hour, but you say, yeah, but I would like to be compensated for that, be paid for that. An aggregator could trade these kind of flexibility options into the market. And such an aggregator doesn't have to be a governmental body. It could be a governmental body, but it could also be a blockchain technology or another technology. I don't believe in that directly because it's very, very new yet. But let's see what the future brings.
So we could have smarter grids rather than just a top-down centralized approach.
Exactly, and that's where another buzzword, smart grids. But they could indeed play a big role in the future. And you see that, for example, the Australian Market Authority on Energy, IMO, they predict these things and they work on these things. But they say, for example, electric cars, well, we don't see that happening very quickly. I'd say don't underestimate it. These transitions, these disruptions can go really quickly. So why not design your system in a flexible way? So you could take them into account. When they come, you're prepared for it.
So electric cars will be both an extra pull on the system, but they could also stabilise the system by being batteries when they're not being driven.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the smart ways of thinking. But the current system doesn't allow this kind of management, more or less. So I expect electric cars to be booming between 2019 2022. Phase out of fossil fuel cars will take you 10 to 15 years, looking at the average age of cars in New South Wales. Let's say 2040. When we talk about when do the stars align, 2040 for electric cars. Phasing out fossil fuel, or let's say coal power generation, also about 2030. These coal generators run to their end of the lifetime. It's economically not viable at the moment to buy new coal-fired power stations. There's a lot of debate about that. So I think by 2040 this could happen. Your train of thought is really nice because, yeah, why not take those options as possibilities and design the system to be flexible and to be able to deal with it when it happens. And I think it's not a question if, but more when will electric cars kick off, etc., rather than it's not going to happen or it is going to happen.
So if I'm going to be sharing power with my neighbours or a big group of us with solar panels, or even with a bit of land with solar panels on it, or battery storage, are going to share our power, how does that change how the grid is built?
Yeah, so the physical environment can stay partly the same. So you might need to update parts because it's also rather old here in Sydney and New South Wales. But the physical world would not have to change that much. You can still use, and why not, it's vested interest, still use your power poles, let's say the poles and wires. What would change is you might see more physical solar panels, more solar farms, possibly more wind farms, but especially the organization behind the system should and must change in order to let you indeed trade with your group of friends or with your neighbors, etc. In the current system, it's hardly possible. My home university is called the University of Groningen, but no strings attached to them anymore because I'm graduated. For the social part, we use the frame innovation methodology, which more or less means we first mapped all the stakeholders in the Australian energy system, so the electricity system, but also cars, etc. And you come to politicians, homeowners, energy companies, etc. So you map who's out there and who's closely involved and not so closely involved. The second step is to look at what are the stakes or the norms and values of these people in the system. So you can say, for example, Well, what does a politician want? He wants recognition. He wants to be liked, etc. Those kind of terms you're speaking about. So we did this for the most important stakeholders in the energy system. Then you look at all these norms and values from the different groups and you try to group them. We came up with 3 important themes, we call them. And the 3 themes were trust. People need to trust their politicians. People need to trust their energy system because it's really important in your daily life. Empowerment as second theme, or control. People want empowerment over the systems. You see that more and more. As well, politicians want control over public opinion. News wants control over the public opinion as well. And the last theme we found was belief. So that's the common theme as, do people believe politicians? Do people believe, for example, in climate change? And do people believe that renewable technologies will work? Or do they believe in fossil fuels? And from these themes, so you go really back, you step away from the technical system, go back to the human values, different paths, forget about the problem for a while, and really look into this human part. From the human part, we took the new frame, as if the ban of fossil fuels would be the ban of single-use plastic bags. And we looked at how do these themes play out in the plastic bags frame and how can we use this in the energy system. And especially the empowerment part comes back in terms of decentralized system, as well in single-use plastic bags, decentralized bottom-up movement of action to ban plastic bags in small towns. Then, from that point, you could go to new solutions. Like I mentioned, the NADI model, or for example, the NADI model can be used to come with new solutions based on these themes. So you say the current paradigm is really governmental control, decentralized control, big companies control, with the goal to deliver safe and reliable energy via a centralized grid. It's not working really well, as ACCC noticed. So a solution would be governmental interventions in the market by some quick market fixes. For example, rules that companies could not have more than a certain amount of generation capacity in the system. This will indeed likely bring prices down, so it would work for a part. But when you look at these themes, trust, empowerment, belief, I think you should go to a system that is not one directional, not only sending, so you want to go to a system that's more interacting. People, homeowners can more interact with the system. The users have more power, so that's the empowerment theme. And a solution there could be a redesign of the energy market. Consumers become prosumers. You put an aggregator into place that takes into account all the bits of energy, especially electricity from homeowners. The aggregator could also bid in negative energy into the market. For example, when there is a peak demand and you don't mind switching off your fridge for a while, you could say, yeah, but I want to do that, but I would like to be compensated. And the aggregator could, based on the consumer will and consumer, do this in the wholesale market. And at this point, no possibility for the consumer to have a voice in the wholesale market. So instead of a quick fix, you might want to think about a redesign of the energy market that in the end benefits all, because also the old parties can still provide a role. The Osgrids of this world or the transmission coordinators, they can still do maintenance, etc. on the transmission lines, because this is vested interest. You would like these things to stay in place.
That was Sander Fransen charting the zero carbon energy future for New South Wales. Part 2 of Sander will be next week.
One good thing about the singularity, we happen to survive, at least everything will be free. No third world or double-dip recession, a single singularity, no ownership or possession. I shall have waited for singularity.
That was from The Singularity by Paul Rhodes. And that's all from us this week on Diffusion. Would you like to hear your voice on radio? Record a voice memo on your phone or use the voicemail tab on the website. We need more people contributing stories to Diffusion. Send your contributions, opinions, helpful suggestions, and donations to science@diffusionradio.com. That's science@diffusionradio.com. And please do send me an email with a question I can answer on the show. Please like the Diffusion Science Radio page on Facebook and rate us on iTunes. Tell your friends. Follow me on Twitter @Ian Woolf. A big thank you to Joanna for signing up to support the show at patreon.com/diffusionradio. The news music was Rhinos Theme by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Sound check and fact checking by Charles Willock. I produce Diffusion, which is broadcast around Australia to 26 stations on the Community Radio Network, including 2 RBM in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, 8 CCC in Alice Springs and Tennant Creek, 2 NVR in Nambucca Valley, 3 MBR in the Mallee Border districts of Victoria and South Australia, 7 LTN City Park Radio in Launceston, Tasmania, and my local station, 2RDJ, in Burwood, New South Wales. Diffusion is syndicated globally on the National Science Foundation's Science 360 internet radio station and also on astronomy.fm. Subscribe to the podcast on the Diffusion website, www.diffusionradio.com. That's www.diffusionradio.com, and check the website for links, photos and videos about this week's show. If you enjoyed the show, you can explore more than 950 previous episodes archived on diffusionradio.com, where the shows are labelled by keywords so you can focus in on the stories you want to hear. Subscribe to the Diffusion YouTube channel at youtube.com/c/diffusionradio. I'm Ian Woolf. Join us inside your audio device of choice for more science wondering next week on Diffusion Science Radio.
Science is fun. It helps you to learn, to know, and to appreciate. When you study science, you may go on field trips. You discover the marvelous interrelationships between all living things. You learn to read the history of the Earth as it is written in rocks and fossils. You find out what makes things tick, everything from a molecule to a living organism. In the study of science is found the most useful and satisfying knowledge of man. Knowledge of his physical world, its past, its present, and its future. And in your moments of relaxation, now and in the years to come, you will find the study of science leading you into fascinating pursuits. Photography, collecting. Why study science? Study science because you will find in the study of science a richer, more rewarding life.